All right, Steelers fans, welcome into the Knoll Road Week 12. Did you know the Steelers are just 1-12 in Chicago all time? That's a crazy stat. But the Steelers defense has been lights out the last 3 weeks, shutting dudes down. Herbert, Flacco, Daniel Jones, all under 7 yards per throw. Can they make it 4? Caleb Williams and the Bears is up next. Is Williams a rising star or just the next victim of this Steelers resurgent defense? Heyward's in a boot. Slay's in protocol. We got updates there, though. And the Bears, they got updates, too. They're limping into this thing. We're asking Rodgers or Rudolph as well here on the Knoll Road. What is at stake this week? Might be even bigger than just one game. So let's do this. Here we go.
Then to the corner of the end zone. Oh, it's for a touchdown!
All right, yeah, buddy. I'm Gavin Dawson along with New Bear Lisnewski. Dawson, a New Bear here on the Knoll Road. We go long form 4 times a week. If you like the video, and if you haven't subscribed yet, consider doing that. How you doing this weekend, buddy?
Well, I mean, Saturdays are tough right now, but this is a Sunday show, and I'm focused on the Sunday games. And as we start unpacking these, what I like about everything that we're going to talk about here today is that there's like a yin and a yang. There's an opposites attract, there's a magnetic pull, and something's got to give.
Yes, something does have to give. But the good news is it's not going to be Cam Heyward's ankle, lower leg. What was his injury? Because the news is he is going to play. Darius Slay is going to play, although it appears James Pierre is going to start. But there's the update, ESPN. It's all over the place right now, and that is fantastic news for this Steelers defense. I guess he had an ankle injury and was in a boot after Friday's practice. Sent a scare through Steelers Nation.
Yeah, especially because I know we're going to talk about some of the metrics. You mentioned Pierre already and the Slay debate based on Tomlin believing that starters don't lose their job because of injuries, while also believing that your performance dictate who's going to play. And we're going to see how that shakes out for sure. The litmus test with this thing is, Caleb holding it versus the guys hunting him.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And then on the other side, the Bears injuries, I would say massive advantage Steelers. Like, this has got to be the day where if Aaron Rodgers does play, you go to Rodgers and say, dude, if we're going to pass it 70% of this game, we might as well just play Mason Rudolph. And if you are going to pass it, it better be to the tight ends. But we got to see a ton of Jalen Warren and Kenny Gainwell in this game, testing the Bears linebackers to make plays and keep them under 5 yards an attempt. I don't think they can do it. And this should absolutely be a Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith breakout party.
Yeah, this is, if last week or at any point you've heard me talk about being stubborn on purpose, with purpose, for a purpose, it screams this week when you're talking about being down basically all the inside linebackers and DBs and, up and down this team. I mean, CJ Gardner-Johnson joined 5 minutes ago and he's up there among the league leaders in sacks, coming off the edge a couple of times. I think he's got 3. And you go, okay, well, who's going to step up and put their face in the fan? It shouldn't matter, especially with the athleticism that we saw out of Broderick Jones getting downfield, moving dudes around, and those big uglies up front being able to make just enough of a crease. I'm going to go lean into Chicago, even though we're talking about rooting for the Steelers, right? Like, what did Gale Sayers say? 18 inches of daylight. That's all I need. I don't even know if Warren needs that much.
No, he doesn't, man. That guy is elusive, dude. He's got everything, if you ask me. And then on top of the linebackers being out, I don't know what you heard coming out of Chicago, but Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon are questionable as well at corner. But, the stat that I saw that's fascinating here is the Bears love to play nickel 80% of the time. I think 4th most in the entire NFL. So that's already showing you maybe they're trying to protect themselves. They feel like they got better players on the back end. But if those 2 corners are out, you're really relying on backup linebackers to get this thing done. It's got to be a day where the Steelers have a tremendous amount of success offensively, scoring about half their drives and win comfortably. I mean, the Bears are a 3-point favorite, but with all this injury news coming down, I fully expect the Steelers to get the win.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's report, and obviously there's if someone like Tremaine Edmonds, is going to IR, or Roshan Johnson's going to IR, they're saying, Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, there's 3 or 4 other guys on that list who've been listed as questionable, like Brisker and company, and most of them are expected to not play. I mean, I think the official reports, obviously for the 1 p.m. games, you don't get them till 11:30 for fantasy and betting purposes and all that. So it won't be official until 90 minutes before kickoff, regardless of, when your favorite team's out there. And, you're always kind of, I mean, even with Rodgers, like it might go down to the wire where you're doing that as a tease because you're making the other team have to prepare for if this guy goes, but at the same time, in Rodgers' situation, it sure seems like the Steelers are legitimately holding out hope.
They are, and they should. I'm just holding out hope that this defensive resurgence is for real. There's reasons to believe it. I don't know that Caleb Williams is going to be the end all of this conversation and the Bears offense. Like, if you shut down the Bears offense, I think you've made another step in the right direction, but this is getting good. And if it continues for the next 7 games, maybe the calls for Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin's jobs will significantly decrease. They're talking about being less predictable, like all the things that we were talking about, especially after the Bengals game. Internally, they were having the same conversations as well. And they have simplified their approach and provided deception at the same time. And that's not always the easiest thing to do. So you take that going into this week's game in Chicago, New Bear. The Bears have the 4th most yards overall, 2nd most rushing yards behind only Buffalo. And if I'm Chicago right now, I'm thinking we need to come out here and try to run it right down their throats. Chase Brown was very efficient once again. They got into a situation, the Bengals did, where they needed quick scores, but Brown could have easily run for 150 yards against the Steelers last week. And then Vidal, he went for nearly 100 with the Chargers. So I think they've mitigated the bust and some of the coverage stuff, and their safeties have been better. But I still think a lot of this is coming down to a theme throughout the season. That's been the play of Keanu Benton and your 2 linebackers. I don't know if they're strong enough in that middle triangle of the defense right there in their front. So is that something you think they can really get figured out, or they're just going to have to deal with, like, as the weak point of their defense and say, hey, guess what? You're going to be able to run the ball against us still, but we got players at safety and our corners have rounded into form.
No, I mean, no. This is the week that TJ Watt makes his money, where it doesn't show up in the counting stats stuff that everyone wants to prop Myles Garrett up with the sack numbers that everybody loves and wants to just wave, like all of a sudden TJ's washed. I mean, this is one of those weeks where he proves that he's the most complete edge in the league and the highest grade run defender, regardless of what happens in the sack column, where he is still on pace to yet again go into double digits. Having said that, Peyton Wilson is also on pace to break the Steelers' all-time single-season tackles record. I mean, you're talking about James Ferrier and company. It's funny the way that some of this stuff gets counted up. Total tackles versus solo tackles. Shout out Lawrence Timmons and some of the other really, really outstanding linebackers the Steelers have had over time, with the caveat that it would be a 17-game season versus 16 that some of those guys played in. And when you go, per game, you could make that argument for the old guys that you might like a little better, or just, you had their jersey when you were a kid. When you just start thinking about how it could happen, is why did it happen early in the season? Because those guys couldn't see, because guys were getting caught up on blocks, because Cam wasn't in shape and guys weren't staying in their lanes, and Benton was still being asked to be the nose. When you talk about Y.A. Black stepping in and moving 2 guys, or occupying 2 guys at the very least, and changing the math because you got to do the same thing with TJ, now all of a sudden those lanes are a little bit cleaner. What I am going to be really interested to see is the eye discipline of Wilson and also Patrick Queen, because the one thing Ben Johnson does, if not better than at least as good as anyone in the whole damn league, is manipulate that horizontal stretch as much as he does vertical stuff in the passing game. The way that he plays with pulling linemen the wrong way, with pre-snap motion, with post-snap fakes, reverses, and all the different things that he wants to do to really unleash this thing. And it wasn't just gimmicky stuff, that you saw in Detroit, because they had that NASCAR offense with stars at every position. You're starting to see these guys in navy blue and orange step into the roles that the stars played for him in Detroit. And Swift is one of those guys, when healthy, who's got about as much go as anyone. And the 7th round rookie stepped in and had a day for him. You start talking about production from the tight end level. And of course, the toys that he's got outside going from, Adunze. DJ Moore's been relatively quiet. Is this a game where your third corner starts getting dusted, by Luther Burden the third, no pun intended. There's just a lot to like about what Chicago can do. It was specifically talking about running game, though. This has to be the game that TJ Watt gets paid.
Well, I hope so, man. I listened to the entire Coach Tomlin press conference from, what was it, Tuesday or Wednesday, and one of his lines in there that he likes to use from time to time is, teams are revealing themselves. They're letting you know who they are here as we get into November. And after Thanksgiving, you really are who you are. So I guess they have 1 or 2 more games before we get to that late stretch of the season where your identity is your identity. But I don't mind it necessarily if you're the team that can stop the big plays and get run on. I don't think that is a crucial flaw. Like, the reason you run the ball in the NFL is to try to get to 3rd and short, but really it's to make them try to stop your run so you can get the big plays. And if teams can run it against you but not give the big plays, it's just so hard to drive the field and pick up 4 and 5 first downs in a row without getting stopped and having to kick a field goal. So, but I'm getting killed in the comments by Mike. Salute to Mike. I think there have been narratives, there have been storylines in September, in October, in November. But this is the point in the season where you got to stop thinking what you thought about a team or what you think should be about a team and acknowledge what is. And what is, this team is weak up the middle against the run. And I don't think that's going to switch until, they get a player better than Keanu Benton in the middle. And, I think Derek Harmon's been a solid rookie, but he's got progress to make there as well as far as collapsing that middle. Like, Peyton Wilson is your leading tackler because he might be the fastest guy on defense. He's in the middle, and the people in front of him aren't making enough plays to stop the run. So somebody's got to catch the guy after he's gone for 5 yards.
Well, I'm confused a little bit because I thought we were just talking about and strapping in to talk about how the narrative has shifted and these guys are bowing their necks and that they're going to become this steel curtain once again. I mean, do you not just, you don't see that as a possibility?
Well, I'm challenging it. I think it's somewhere between one of the worst 5 defenses in the NFL and what we thought this defense was going to be. Is that top half? I think so. Is it top 10? I don't know. So for me, it's kind of an acknowledgement this week that the Steelers haven't played well enough to have a tremendous amount of confidence in them. I think the Ravens are going to win the division. I don't think the Steelers can win a playoff game. Their offense isn't good enough, and their defense isn't dominant. If you're going to win with this kind of defense, you would need a great offense. And as we'll talk about a little bit later on with Aaron Rodgers or Mason Rudolph, whoever's calling the signals back there. There's a lot to be desired with this Steelers football team. That's where I am. It's coming off a victory, so maybe it's ringing a little bit of hollow right now. But I think if I was saying these things after a loss, people would be like, "Yep, damn straight."
It's interesting when you really unpack it. Is this is a team that has been asked, meaning the Bears, is this smoke and mirrors? Because you talk about the streak that they're on. They opened 0-2. Nail biter to Minnesota. And I mean, they got the brakes beat off them. Detroit put 52 on them, right? Mm-hmm. And who'd they beat? Flea flicker, run Dallas away, get Dallas out of their game. Raiders turn out to not be any good, right? Washington hit or missed, especially with Daniels out. But, they were due for a sophomore. He was due for a sophomore slump. And you wondered how much they were going to come back despite everything that they did because they did go to the conference championship. You just wondered if that was sustainable. Saints not good. Ravens, I mean, that Ravens game that's a tough watch if you're a Bears fan. And then, you're talking about a shootout with Cincinnati, going up and down, going back and forth with the Giants, and then another 1-score game with Minnesota. It's so weird in Chicago right now that, the joke is that this is all happening because of the Pope. And the football gods, love the Bears, and there aren't going to be any more double doinks, right? Because of good fortune coming from. Where does whether it's injury luck, fumble luck, all the different things. What I will say is that they're going to test them. We're going to get an answer to this question they're going to run the ball and they're going to keep running the ball. And Caleb Williams is a big part of that. He does a lot with his legs, most of the time, running, looking for that big play through the air. But I mean, he's won games with his feet. You can't deny the thumbnail we're going to throw up for this show is him dancing across the pylon, right? So, all those things play off of each other. Swift is really, really, really capable. The rookie behind him, if they do need to give him a breather, if he were, he's a really tight wound guy. He's had a lot of, hamstring, quad, leg type soft tissue stuff throughout his career, which is really what kept him from breaking out pretty much ever. And he's been sturdy and solid, if not that breakout guy so far in Chicago, but he's playing really well this year. And he's really talented. And, it's going to be interesting because everything that you're talking about, I think was true with October. I think it's been less true since we've been getting more out of Y.A. Black. And I think it's been less true since we've been getting more with Jalen Ramsey playing in the middle of the field. And the cool thing is we're going to get an answer.
Yeah. And again, I'd like the Steelers to win this game. I think it's fair to say Caleb Williams has become a pretty effective quarterback with his surroundings, but that's not saying he's good. Like some of the advanced metrics on Williams are still pretty bad. The bad throw percentage, the completion percentage over expectations, those two things are pretty clear indicators of who you are as a quarterback. And both of those, he's like bottom 10 in the league, not as bad as like JJ McCarthy, who can't hit the broadside of a barn right now. But the Bears are solid, and it's not because of Caleb. It's with Caleb. Their rebuilt offensive line has worked out really well. The Ben Johnson effect is there. DeAndre Swift has given them a threat in the run game that has to be respected. And, their weapons, well, I guess nobody's really standing out. All of these guys can beat you. I mean, they got 4 or 5 guys over there now that maybe if Caleb Williams was a top 5 quarterback would be setting the league on fire right now. So, outside of the quarterback, Chicago better than me, but I feel like this has been one of the better offensive team builds they've had in a long time.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people who believe that if either Fields or Trubisky or, especially like a Cutler, if it had ever all come together where you had, this complete of a team, and now the defense is obviously ravaged by injuries, but specifically when you talk about Trubisky on the way in and Fields on the way in with what they have at the skill positions and then what they did in the offseason going and getting Tooney, going and really shoring up that offensive line, it really looks like, a guy that here in Pittsburgh, there was some debate when you go back overtime and you talk about Broderick Jones' struggles when you look at Darnell Wright and what he looked like he was going to be and then was up and down in between. And, all the reports out of Chicago right now are that he's really starting to find his way alongside Jonah Jackson and with Drew Dahlman and, of course, Tooney, he's an all-pro and one of the all-time great, value picks in NFL draft history. It's a really, really, really sturdy group up front that can be versatile and do a lot of different things, just like the skill position guys around them. Caleb Williams really has no excuse to be under 60% as a passer. And the question that you asked is like, this is one of the best offensive builds. How about the data that supports that in terms of they're leading the NFL in wide open percentage. Like 30% of his throws or something like that are wide open dudes. I think 12 of his 13 touchdowns are to what are qualified as wide open receivers, right? You're talking about Joe Brady level stuff in Buffalo because, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers is on that list too in terms of when they get the job done, it's done right. It's just the inconsistency and the variance in between the splash plays and moving the chains.
Yeah, and, because of the Caleb Williams effect, I do feel like this is a picture-perfect opponent for the Steelers. If you're going to be an underdog against anybody and having to go on the road and get a win, like the Steelers' strength and Caleb Williams being back there, it should present a lot of great opportunities for the Steelers to make big plays and get the turnovers that almost guarantee success for them. But, more than that, I do want to, and maybe we'll do a deep dive on this next week, but the defensive adjustments the Steelers have made is just – it's fantastic, and it's going to give them a chance to be a playoff team. More split safeties, less blitzing, less man. Like they have done a really good job fixing this thing on the fly. And you talk about team builds and roster builds and not settling. Like this has been a hell of a job by the front office and the coaching staff to collectively come up with the answers, that can at least make them a pretty dang good defense. I think still, and who knows, maybe after everything they've done evolving into that top 5 group that we predicted when the season started is still on the cards.
So parallel to having the highest wide open percentage, he also has, I believe, the lowest, if not second low. I think it's the lowest at the opposite end of that spectrum, tight window throws, like of qualified quarterbacks in the league. And you go, okay, well, that makes sense. If dudes are running wide open, he shouldn't be having to fit balls into tight windows. But another part of that is he holds the ball. He's got the longest average time to throw. And I think Sports Illustrated has him at like 3.25, and PFF has him at like 3.36. The Steelers are getting home almost a full second, depending, 3/4 of a second. So like that's what I talk about in terms of like, something's got to give in terms of how these teams play, and particularly the way, whether they're blitzing and playing man or man free, or they're playing zone, and it's TJ Watt's got to beat Darnell Wright and et cetera, across the piano keys. This is going to be one of those interesting weeks. I think Caleb's career interception percentage is like 1.2, 1.3. He was like 1.1, 1.2 as a rookie, and he's right there again as a sophomore. He doesn't throw the ball to the other team. And part of that is he hangs onto the ball and he will run around and make those no. Okay, yes, throws, just like guys shooting, 40-foot threes in the NBA. It's like when people talk about him being a generational talent, it's because of the young Mahomes effect. He does things that make you go, wow. The problem with Caleb Williams is if he would just take the check down sometimes, he wouldn't have to do that stuff. And
you got to get to him, and then when he does run, he can kill you. I think Mahomes is a decent comp. I think he's like part Mahomes, part Jalen Hurts.
Well, have you seen the next gen stats on Caleb Williams? I didn't know he was putting up plus 20 mile an hour as often as he is. But like the only dudes that are ahead of him is the Achans and King Henry on a breakaway and Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, he's on a very short, who's who, I'm him type of list. And when you have that in your back pocket, I mean, that was the thing that young Lamar Jackson, everyone was waiting for him to evolve into the quote unquote real quarterback. And then when Lamar starts throwing up perfect passer ratings and Lamar starts throwing up, when you go these 16 game samples that, no one has done, not as a combined touchdown guy, not as a runner and a passer, but as a thrower of the football, now everyone's worried that Lamar's lost a step, right? Because of the injuries and playing hurt and how he might not have that gear. Caleb Williams is putting that stuff on next gen stats, not just on tape where he's running around and, okay, he's faster. He's running away from a, 325-pound nose tackle who broke free. Okay, fine. No, dude, he's taking that crossing the line and breaking your heart.
Yeah, he is, man. He's a dangerous player, and they have 7 wins for a reason. Even though their scoring differential places them as one of the 5 worst 7-win teams through 10 games in the history of the NFL. Let's get to some more objective reality, and I don't want to be negative about this team. I just want the audience to know that when they tune in here to the Knoll Road, I'm going to tell you, exactly what I think. And I think when it comes to evaluating how good you are, who's the best people to listen to in the entire football ecosystem? Is it fans? No. Is it media? No. Is it the coaches? No. They're going to be lying to you. Is it the front office guy? No. He's trying to protect his job and present the calm waters. You go to the sports books, my man. Let me just share the screen. This is market-derived team tiers based on betting market rankings for the NFL. And, the little green number next to the logo is just in general on a neutral field, how much you would plus them or minus them, depending on an average opponent. And, I think when most of us think about the Steelers, we might put them in the could be good, maybe, along with the Patriots and Niners, Broncos, Buccaneers, or maybe Super Bowl aspirations with the Packers. Colts, you just beat them. Ravens, who are just 500, even though they've won 4 in a row. And maybe some people would even want to put them like up there with the Bills or the Seahawks or the Eagles or something. I don't know what tier you would want to put them in, but their peers right now, based on how sports books and odds makers are handicapping them, is actually worse than the Jags, Cowboys, Vikings, Bears, and Houston Texans. Newbear, react to that.
Yeah, the thing everyone's going to say about this is, when does Sam Darnold start seeing ghosts? And he already did. because he had to have some of his defensive guys go to the podium and basically say, fuck you if you don't believe in it. I mean, one guy literally said that. And that's how far, people are expecting the Seahawks to fall. I think you look at the Chargers ahead of them and you go, do we really believe Justin Herbert's going to be okay after we saw guys on the Houston Texans? Daniel Hunter had to change the way he was sacking him to not blow out his knee. Shout out to Daniel Hunter. He did a really solid thing. I don't know if you saw that clip, but Josh Allen's lucky to be walking today. Josh Allen is the one I'm talking about. I was talking about Justin Herbert and my brain fired into that. Justin Herbert is lucky to not have CTE because he was getting hit high and low. And I felt like he was going to end up in like a broken rib type situation. The Allen thing was just a brain synapse firing. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Hunter because you have the Texans on that list as well. And they're a team that couldn't win with CJ Stroud. And now all of a sudden they can't be beaten with David Mills and his neck. And he's out there throwing 150 yards, but getting them across the finish line. And it's such a crazy week-to-week league. And there's so much variance between who's healthy and who shows up and sticks to their game flow and is able to, pull this thing out in the end. And I think this week that is going to be the big thing for the Bears. If the Steelers are able to get up, or if the Steelers are able to go back and forth, do the Bears feel like they have to throw a trick play? Because the Bears want to front run. The Bears want to play fast. They want to throw over your head. They want to get you on the ropes and then kind of mitigate everything they don't have on the other side of the ball. They were able to do it to Dallas, and then you see Dallas and Dak have to drop back, and that's when they feel like they can get home. That's when they feel like they can cover up some of the stuff that they're lacking, right? If they're going back and forth, and it's one of those games in the 20s, does Chicago, is this a game where you are able to force Caleb into a mistake and force him to play from behind, hold the ball, strip sack, peanut punch type stuff? But more importantly, like when you do trick him, because the Steelers should have many more interceptions and at least 2 or 3 pick sixes, they just can't catch the damn ball, right? I mean, everyone talks about the list that Herbig and Watt are on. Herbig's dropped the pick. JPJ dropped the pick six. Like Duggar had the pick six last week. He probably should have had another one. So when he does take a chance in a tight window game, even though he isn't making, like 10% of his throws are tight window throws. Okay, well, if he throws the ball 30 times, there's still going to be 3 or 4 of those. Can you turn one of those around and turn this into a Pittsburgh Steelers dictated game?
Well, I'm glad you brought up turnovers, my man, because I think along with everything that we've talked about so far in this show, turnovers are probably the most important thing. The Steelers are 1-3 when they don't get a turnover. They are undefeated when they win the turnover battle. Chicago actually leads the league in turnover differential. You mentioned the Cowboys game. They're down 10 in the third, driving to make it a 1-score game. George Pickens volleyball sets a drop into, was it Bayard's hands? And they go down and score a touchdown. It's a 17-point game. Cowboys never threatened again. But the Bears have 22 takeaways, including 15 interceptions. It's come out of nowhere, hasn't it? Like turnovers can be fickle. But Bayard, Edmonds, and Nahshon Wright combined have 13 interceptions. And so much of that's going to come down to pressure. Chicago is allowing a league low 2.2 sacks plus turnovers per game. And Pittsburgh, averaging 5.1 sacks plus takeaways per game. That's second in the league. So this is strength on strength with Chicago's ability to not get Caleb Williams sacked, not turn the ball over, against the Steelers' ability to do the exact opposite.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like when you have a defense that is like high risk, high reward, and they're able to pay that off. That's what the Steelers were early. You talked about them beating the Colts. I mean, they did beat the Patriots too, right? So when you start talking about the teams they've beaten, it really pisses you off when you look at the teams that they've lost to and how they've lost those games. And what's going to be really interesting Sunday is if you feed Jaylen Warren. I mean, how many times have you and I said this is a Jaylen Warren 30-touch game? Okay, well, if you don't want to wear Jaylen Warren out, then what did they say? Jaylen Warren wasn't on the field for any of the third downs because they liked the way Kenny Gainwell looked. Okay, fine. Give him the ball. Like, plug it up in there and shrink this thing down, because and what I'm saying is if they're able to get a couple of those, right? Because if you're able to really control this game and not allow the Bears to front run, I feel like they're a different team. If you allow them to hang around, they believe they're going to find a way to get it done at the end.
Now, if you don't get the turnovers, I guess the other angle that I'd like to get your thoughts on about this matchup, a 1:00 matchup at Soldier Field. Did we mention how many big plays the Bears give up? They give up 6.2 yards per play, better than only Cincinnati and Washington. They do have the third most one-score victories in the league. That can be a sign of fool's gold. They've committed 80 penalties. Only 3 teams have committed more. Like, they are doing a number of things defensively that should be exploitable. But you got to be able to protect, and you got to be able to push the ball downfield, which the Steelers are amongst the worst teams in the NFL at doing. So how do you pursue those big plays? The Bears defense is giving up 0.29 touchdowns per drive, nearly a third of the time the opponent has the ball. That's better than only 4 teams. So, and then in terms of forcing the opponent to punt, Chicago's the worst in the league. Like, this is a game that demands not only offensive efficiency, but offensive big play. I don't know that either of those quarterbacks that could play in this game. Maybe Will Howard's willing to do it. I don't know, but I've lost faith in the Steelers' ability to make consistent big plays, and that robs you of win probability against Chicago. I still think there's plenty of other ways to beat them with Warren and your tight ends, but this has got to be the game where you're like, we're moving the ball down the field. Is this Calvin Austin more involved? Is this actually throwing the ball to Roman Wilson, not hunting completions to DK Metcalf? Those are amongst the reasons that I really don't care who plays quarterback on Sunday, but I would be very intrigued if it is Mason Rudolph, and with a week of preparation, what more could he add?
So you hit a lot of the nails with the head of the hammer, right? Because you're talking about Roman Wilson and God bless. You can't have 3 inside linebackers down and not talk about Freiermuth. You can't talk about, like, if you're going to be forcing balls, right? And if they're sitting in shell or otherwise double cover in 4, and you're forcing DK the ball to try to get him going, totally understand what you're trying to do. And to your point about Mike clapping in the comments, one of the things that he said that's easy to agree with is Aaron Rodgers is trying to force this offense to evolve. He's trying to force this offense to do other things. Maybe he's trying to put something on tape to show Arthur Smith the right way to do it. I don't know. But what is true on the tape, and I know, like, a lot of folks are talking about religiously watching all 22, Roman Wilson's open. Freiermuth's open. If they're not running love of the game routes, if they're actually part of the concept, they're open. And when Mason Rudolph hits Roman Wilson on a simple out route, that's what makes people stand up, because they're seeing it, and Tommy Jaggy and company are putting it all over Twitter, and you're going, throw this man the ball. Roman Wilson, and then Freiermuth on the backside. But what I don't understand at all is, because Freiermuth has proven to be more than willing to be a crash test dummy. He has proven to be more than willing to go into the seam, to seek contact, and to hang onto the ball. And they're just not even really looking at it, right? I mean, he had the first Cincinnati game, he had a big game. He was non-existent again the last time. Some of that's, game script. But the thing that he needs to be brought up with him is early in the season, like you were talking about the defense and what they were versus what they are, what they're going to be. Everyone talked about, you can't play Muth in the 12 and 13. You got to play Spencer Anderson and Mount Washington. We get it. But Muth is out there efforting for real as a blocker. He's putting dudes on roller skates. He's burying dudes in the right matchups. He is really, you got to reward that stuff. You can't keep forcing Jonnu out there just because you're paying him and he was part of the Mika Fitzpatrick trade. If Freiermuth's open and he's efforting as a blocker, you got to find a way to turn that into, throwbacks off of that, stick nods off of that, and tell Aaron Rodgers, who likes to tell all the receivers, hey, if you want the ball more, come watch film with me. How about Artie and Mike sit down with him, Roman, and Muth and say, hey, Aaron, look at these guys too. Because the thing that Mason Rudolph did last week, yes, he missed guy in the end zone. He missed DK in the end zone. Yes, he miscommunicated and fucked up the end of the one drive that should have been a touchdown drive. They settled for a field goal. But the thing Mason Rudolph does that makes everyone stand up is whoever's open is getting the ball. He's not forcing it to anybody. And you might not like the math that says, well, Aaron Rodgers' average depth of target was still twice as much in that game. Fine. The way it felt to everybody in the stands when you're going up and down the field and it looks easy is what isn't the case with 8. Everything feels hard. Everything feels forced because he's not playing on time. And, as clutch as he was early, he hasn't been on target late.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think this game has a ton of urgency on it. If you miss if you miss this week and lose this game, your playoff probability will dip below 50%. If you win, I think it's 73%. So a huge spread on this once again. But more than that, I'd like to build off what you were just saying there with Rodgers. He thinks he's bringing kids in to watch film to educate them. I would love it if the coaches and the kids would get in there with Rodgers and say, man, we really thought we were going to get more from you. Let's turn it around and say, if you want to continue to play this game, then, we need these passes downfield. We need chunk plays. Our defense isn't good enough that we can play boring football. So to me, this matchup is about evolution. It's one of 7 more opportunities before the playoffs to prove that you can be more than what we've seen so far. And that is Aaron Rodgers. But, so far this season, the pass defense has done it. The pass defense has showed we can be way better than what you thought we were the first 8 weeks. The run game has said we can be way better than what you saw the first 3 weeks. Darnell Washington is saying, I'm way better than what you saw for the first 2 seasons. Fautanu has done it. He's way better at right tackle. Broderick Jones has actually done it in 2/3 of the games. He's got 3 or 4 games that have been bad. So can the Steelers take that next step towards probability and making me eat crow? I'm already eating crow, acknowledging they're not as good as what I thought they were for the first 2 months of the season. Now make me eat crow again by proving that you can be one of the rare teams to significantly change your stripes at this point in the season.
Yeah, and I want to be clear about one thing. I'm not someone who gets caught up as much in, his high for the season is 249, and he had another 244, a 235. I'm not as wound up in the fact that, he only threw for 139 yards in a win. And we did praise him early because of the clutch play, because when you needed a drive and you had to get done and it was winning time, Aaron Rodgers was Aaron Rodgers. This 18-week season, we talked about this early about how the Steelers kind of treat each one like a scrimmage, whereas instead of being 7-1 and having your foot on the throat of the North, and this is going to be this season where they're feeling it out, because as long as they're playing their best football, right? That's one of the Tomlinism, tent poles, is they want to get better during the season and be playing their best football on the way into the playoffs. Early this season so far, you've left some wins on the table because of the stubbornness that you've tried to do this thing between Aaron Rodgers and the tight ends, not going to get in a wide receiver 2 at the trade deadline. But then in spite of all those things, Roman Wilson is showing you the average yards per route versus targets, open rate versus targets, right? Target the dude who's open. Look at the tape. You see Muth, it's the same kind of thing. Look at Warren's success rate, stick with the run. In spite of everything that we're talking about and the fact that they're not what they could be and maybe not what they thought they were, certainly not a historic team. I mean, the guy who said that isn't even on the team anymore, right, from the preseason to now. And they made some great moves way before the deadline that everyone kind of, because of what they didn't do at the deadline. We're going to see more of Peppers at some point. We've seen a ton already out of Duggar. And there's a lot to work with. There's a lot to like. There's a ton to talk about from week to week. Is objectively look at Aaron Rodgers and believe it's just, you're just good and it's everybody else's fault.
Yeah, and I think that happens with legends. People still believe LeBron James is one of the best defenders in the NBA. He
was all NBA defense last year. Why?
Yeah, because he was at one point.
He was negative 100 plus minus. His team was just better with him off the floor.
And it's hard. But like we've talked about in previous videos, Father Time is undefeated. Is there any late buzz on which way we should be leaning on who's going to play out? I've assumed that Aaron Rodgers is going to get his way, and if he's somewhat comfortable and it's his non-throwing hand, I think he's going to go out there and give it a shot. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they're doing some gamesmanship here.
Probably goes down to the minute. I love all the stuff on social about how we're going to get to see Perk Rodgers. I don't want to see Perk Rodgers. If he needs to be Perk Rodgers, don't play this week. Non-throwing hand or not, the number one thing that I've been harping on is how uncomfortable he is and how much he still hasn't figured out that brain synapse that wants to fire that tells him he can go get out of the pocket and go pick up a first down. And until he gets comfortable with who he has become, which can still be a damn fine quarterback and ride off into the sunset with another really interesting chapter in his legacy, like until that happens, if he can't protect himself, because now we're one patty cake, because they're gonna, the other guys in the other team are gonna, you get him to fall down once and he has to land on that arm and it actually breaks. A week to week thing becomes a 4 to 6 or a 6 to 8 week thing. Non-throwing hand or not, if he fully breaks this thing, he's not going to have a choice. It's not going to be him and the team doctor playing rock, paper, scissors. This is going to become Mason Rudolph's team.
I don't want him to go full Brett Favre, but dude, I think Perk Rodgers is exactly what we need. That's how heroin got its name, right?
Yeah,
because it made people feel like a hero.
Yeah.
That's what Rodgers needs is confidence. Right now, he's avoiding contact. Right now, he doesn't feel like a hero. He plays like an old man. He got mad at Broderick Jones for pushing him down after that touchdown throw because he's scared of getting hurt. Then a few weeks later, he falls back on his wrist and breaks his wrist, which proves that he should be scared. But we need Rodgers to be the fire-breathing dragon that he was early in his career and play fearless. If you can't continue to play fearless and you're not tall like Flacco or Brady in the pocket seeing over everything, you don't belong in football at the age of 41 coming up on 42. Now, we don't want drug addicted and ravaged by years and years of addiction guy trying to go out there and play football, because how it wreaks havoc on your brain and your body and your nutrition and everything. Like, that's not a good place to be. But if you wanted to go Perk Rodgers for the rest of this season plus playoffs, I would almost guarantee it would be a significantly better version of him than we've seen so far this year. How about that for an irresponsible take?
Yeah, that's about as good as it gets. And, if you're going to talk about being on the Knoll Road and turning back the clock, I mean, there were a lot of stories about a lot of guys during that time frame that, we can get into at a later date. And I mean, how different the world was back when they were winning, all those Super Bowls and becoming, the team, the legendary standard is the standard stuff, where all that comes from. And, unfortunately, derailed some big time careers potentially as well. The thing about Rodgers here at the end is what you're talking about. And I know you're half joking, or maybe it's like a 60-40 thing. Maybe, okay, it's even less than that. But like what is interesting about it is if you sit this week and you watch, if Artie and Mike think it's too disrespectful to take him into the film room with the young kids and talk to them like they're equals, might he learn something from watching Sunday from the sidelines as Mason Rudolph is putting together like a 20 for 30 for 265 and 2 and everybody eats, like a hyper efficient day where he's able to go, oh, and no one has to say anything. He just gets to see it. Like, do you think that's just impossible at this time?
What's that? Can you reframe that question for me?
Okay, so you talk all the time about like a rookie quarterback would come in and you redshirt him, right? Pat Mahomes got to sit for a year behind Alex Smith. He got to watch.
Yeah.
If it's too disrespectful for Mike and Artie to put Roman Wilson in a room with him and say, Aaron, I know you want Roman to watch film with you, but we want you to watch film with Roman because we want you to see, here's all the cut-ups of Roman Wilson is open, right? And maybe that's too disrespectful, and they care about him too much and the relationship they talk about all the time, and they want him to come back next year, so they want him to feel, like the prince that was promised. If that's too disrespectful, like couldn't someone step in this week and say, why don't you watch Mason run the offense and throw the ball to whoever's open and see how it goes? And then no one has to say anything. It's completely objective, and the proof is not in the pudding, but on the field.
He'll learn you up just like he tried to learn up Kenny Pickett a couple years ago, as far as what playing on schedule can look like for. I think if they're walking on eggshells around Aaron Rodgers enough to let him play, even if they think it might not be the best interest of the team or they're not being direct with him with film, I mean, you're already deferring to Rodgers too much. Even in his prime, Rodgers has never been good enough to, I mean, there's another LeBron James comparison. He can't be the GM of the team. Okay. He has a big ego. He's got a commanding voice. He's got a Super Bowl championship. But you can't let him dictate to you what he thinks should be happening with the coaching, with the evaluations, and with the decision on who plays and who doesn't. Buddy, we went about 10 minutes late. It was a fantastic conversation. Dawson and New Bear here on the Knoll Road. Don't get gassed up by beating the Bengals. Go beat the Bears, then go beat the Bills, who are kind of on the ropes right now. Then we'll see about the Ravens. And maybe I'll flip-flop once again. Dawson and New Bear, have a great game day. 12 o'clock, Soldier Field. Steelers are going to go whoop them. Until then, we'll see you next time here on the Knoll Road.